Hey everyone, welcome to Anime Dreams. Today's fanfic topic is, what if female Naruto found herself in a dilemma? Part 4. Disclaimer, this content is created for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not claim ownership of any anime footage featured in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's dive right into it. 3.5 years ago. Did you ever stop to consider why you were placed into teams? Kakashi's sharp gaze swept over the trio as he held Sasuke down effortlessly. His single, visible eye carried an air of disappointment, as though he was staring at a group of clueless children. Tied against the tree stump, Naruto couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration. Why had Kakashi singled her out just for trying to eat? If he hadn't tricked them into skipping breakfast, she wouldn't have needed to sneak a meal. Was there really a purpose behind the Hokage and Iruka-sensei assigning them to teams? Naruto rubbed her sore wrists, her brow furrowed in thought. She wanted to voice her irritation, how unfair it all seemed, but the words refused to come out. Despite her frustration, she trusted the Hokage and Iruka-sensei. They weren't the type to act without reason, even if their methods felt harsh. Naruto's lips pressed into a thin line as she glanced at Sakura. The pink-haired girl's expression mirrored her own confusion, her brows knit tightly together as beads of sweat trickled down her face. If even Sakura, one of the smartest in their class, didn't have an answer, what hope did she have? Turning her attention to Sasuke, she couldn't suppress a twitch of satisfaction as their so-called prodigy struggled under Kakashi's unyielding foot. It wasn't the time to laugh, but watching Sasuke get humbled, even for a moment, brought a sliver of relief. Finally, Sakura broke the tense silence. What do you mean? Kakashi didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pressed his foot deeper into Sasuke's back, causing the latter to grimace. For a fleeting moment, Naruto thought Kakashi might actually leave a mark. You've completely missed the point of the exercise, Kakashi said flatly. Naruto stopped fidgeting and snapped her gaze toward him. His visible eye gleamed with a mix of irritation and disbelief, as though he couldn't fathom how they hadn't figured it out yet. If it was so obvious, she thought bitterly, they wouldn't be in this situation. Her eyes met Sasuke's, and though neither spoke, his expression seemed to ask, "Do you know the answer?" She shook her head slightly. If she knew, she would have said it already. So, this test actually had a purpose? Naruto asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she squinted against its glare, wishing her hands weren't bound so she could shield her eyes. Of course it had a purpose, Kakashi replied, his tone firm. And that purpose determines whether you pass or fail. His words were accompanied by a heavy sigh, his visible eye narrowing in disappointment as it flicked back to her. It wasn't the usual disdain she was used to from adults. This time, it felt more like he expected her to know better. Naruto frowned. Why would he expect anything from her? She was always the dead last, wasn't she? Any expectations would have been directed at Sasuke or Sakura, not her. You haven't explained what that purpose is, Sakura pressed, her frustration evident. Naruto turned to her teammate and noted something unusual. For the first time in years, Sakura wasn't looking at her with annoyance or disdain. Instead, her green eyes held a flicker of hope, as if Naruto might be the key to solving this puzzle. Teammate. Naruto's eyes widened as the realization hit her. She groaned audibly, letting her head thunk against the tree stump. The sound drew startled glances from both Sakura and Sasuke, while Kakashi raised a curious eyebrow. They had been missing the obvious all along. Iruka had called them Team 7. Teams worked together. And yet, not once during this entire exercise had they worked as a unit. Each of them had been too consumed by their own goals to consider cooperating. Kakashi's voice broke the silence, laced with teasing. Looks like the so-called dead last figured it out before the Rookie of the Year and the girl with the top academic scores. Sasuke tensed at the jab, while Sakura bristled visibly. Naruto, however, ignored them. For once, it felt good not to be the one underestimated. Care to share your revelation, blonde? Kakashi prodded. Don't call me blonde, and stop calling me dead last. Naruto snapped. Then perhaps you can give me a reason not to, Kakashi countered, his gaze piercing. It was as though he understood the truth. That her poor scores weren't a reflection of her intellect but rather her reluctance to reveal her true potential. Naruto glared at him before answering, the point of the exercise is teamwork. That's why we were assigned to teams. Sasuke's dark eyes widened in realization, while Sakura looked equally stunned. Exactly, Kakashi said, a hint of cheer in his tone as he finally stepped off Sasuke. The black-haired boy winced but didn't argue, his usual arrogance temporarily subdued. If the three of you had worked together, maybe, just maybe, you could have gotten the bells. Despite successfully passing their second Genin exam, their teacher never let them forget how close they had come to losing their chance to become shinobi. He reminded them of it whenever they grumbled about the grueling teamwork exercises or when she pleaded with him to teach her an advanced jutsu. Kakashi-sensei may not have taught Naruto or Sakura any flashy techniques, but he instilled in them the critical importance of teamwork. Years later, as she prepared for her exams at UA High, it was Kakashi's lessons that resonated most deeply with Naruto. While Aizawa-sensei emphasized self-discipline and the importance of personal responsibility, it was Kakashi's teachings about teamwork that guided her approach to challenges. Team Kirishima and Sato, fail. Naruto frowned as the announcement echoed through the empty corridor leading to the training grounds. She stood alone, lost in thought. She knew she should probably be with Recovery Girl, observing her classmates' attempts to pass the exams, but her trembling arms betrayed her uncertainty. She feared what her classmates might think if they noticed. Yaoyorozu and Tsuyu would likely tell her it was normal to feel this way. After all, facing All Might in a test was no small feat. Naruto exhaled, smoothing out the wrinkles in her hero outfit. All Might was formidable, perhaps not quite on the level of Jiraiya, who had easily evaded her punches in the past, but powerful enough to push her limits. Team Asui and Tokoyami, begin. Naruto allowed a small smile to form as she cracked her knuckles, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. She tilted her head toward the ceiling, considering the pairing. Asui and Tokoyami were often grouped together in teamwork drills, and for good reason, their synergy was exceptional. The same could not be said for her team, Naruto, Bakugo, and Midoriya. Naruto grimaced and rubbed her shoulder as she sat on the ground. Of the two, Midoriya was easier to work with, but only when he wasn't avoiding eye contact like she was some kind of enemy. He still seemed unsure around her, as though he believed she had betrayed him. Bakugo, on the other hand, was outright hostile. He glared at her as if she had wronged him by keeping her ninja background and the Nine-Tails secret. But when would it have been the right time to tell them? Even her closest friends back in Konoha, including Hinata, had been unaware of the beast sealed within her. We need to fix this. Naruto cracked her knuckles again, determined. The tension between the three of them was a massive obstacle. If they couldn't resolve it, they wouldn't pass the exam. Kakashi's voice echoed in her mind, if the three of you had worked together, you might have taken the bells. This exam felt like a second chance to take those words to heart. Naruto reflected on her first team back in Konoha. Iruka-sensei had paired them strategically, Sasuke, the top of the class, Sakura, in the middle, and Naruto, the lowest-ranking student. In theory, their strengths balanced out, but in practice, they had spent more time protecting Sakura than completing missions effectively. But what was the purpose of Aizawa-sensei grouping her with Bakugo and Midoriya? Unlike her old team, all three of them were near the top of their class. Midoriya, in particular, excelled in strategy, likely from years of analyzing All Might's techniques. He was their best chance at passing, if they could work together. Why did I let this drag on for so long? Naruto muttered, clenching her fists. Time was slipping away, and she had let the unresolved issues between them fester. Naruto. Startled, she turned to see Todoroki standing nearby, his mismatched eyes filled with quiet concern. Naruto gestured for him to sit beside her, and he obliged without hesitation. She leaned her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes briefly as tension began to ebb away. Todoroki, ever calm and composed, didn't object, even lightly pressing her head back when she moved to lift it. "You shouldn't worry about me," Naruto said softly. Todoroki's lips tightened into a thin line, his gaze thoughtful. Between the two of them, he relied on his quirk far more heavily than she did. Aizawa-sensei could nullify quirks, which put Todoroki at a disadvantage, but chakra could not be cancelled in the same way. "I have a plan," Todoroki reassured her, his tone calm and steady. Naruto raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a small smile as she placed his hovering hand on her head. If he wanted to comfort her, she wouldn't stop him. "You didn't tell Yaoyorozu about this plan, did you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes at him. The brief pause before Todoroki answered was all the confirmation she needed. "Shoto, you need to inform her about the plan," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. The blonde turned sharply, leaning forward until he was pressed against the wall. Her mismatched eyes locked onto his, brows furrowed with determination, while she puffed out her cheeks in exasperation. "Don't act confused. Communication is essential in teamwork. By not telling Yaoyorozu, you're disregarding her input." "Yaoyorozu wouldn't think that way," Shoto replied, his gaze momentarily dropping before quickly meeting hers again. Naruto's lips twitched in faint amusement at his reaction, though she kept her expression composed. "Idiot. How did I not notice sooner?" She adjusted her posture, resting her legs casually over his, and though Shoto blinked at the unexpected contact, he didn't object. "Shoto," she continued, her voice softer but no less insistent, "you're not the only one on this team. If you want to pass the exam, you need to trust her. Yaoyorozu doesn't know you like I do, and she can't read your mind. You have to share the plan with her." He studied her in silence, his expression neutral but his furrowed brows and the way he stroked his chin betraying his deliberation. Naruto knew he was weighing her advice. She also knew he couldn't afford to go it alone. Shoto was brilliant, but even he needed support. "If we're talking about teamwork, you're the one with the bigger issue," Shoto remarked quietly, his piercing gaze meeting hers. Naruto stiffened at the reminder, rolling her shoulders in reluctant acknowledgement. It wasn't a secret, everyone could see it. Even the younger boy's soothing touch on her lower leg couldn't ease the weight of her own guilt. "Midoriya and Bakugo are still keeping their distance from you." "I messed up," she admitted, her voice heavy with regret. His brow arched as though silently asking how this could possibly be her fault. Naruto ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident in her movements. "I should have been honest with them from the start. Out of everyone in the class, I was closest to those two, besides you." Shoto's conflicted gaze lingered on her, his mismatched eyes searching for the right words. If he chose to be gentle, she would appreciate it, but she preferred his blunt honesty. He had been direct with her in the hospital before, and she needed that now. "You should have spoken to them earlier, but it was your secret to keep," he said at last. His tone carried understanding, but his eyes held empathy, not judgment. Naruto's shoulders sank slightly as his words sank in. "You had every right to keep it to yourself, but they've known you the longest." Naruto stared at the ceiling, letting out a shaky breath. "How do you tell people you're from a place that doesn't even exist on the map? Or that you were trained to kill from the age of 6? There's no guidebook for that. I'm here because I failed a mission. If I hadn't broken down, I wouldn't even be here." The confession hung in the air, but Shoto didn't press her further. Instead, his warm left hand stroked her leg, his touch a silent gesture of reassurance. Naruto was grateful for his restraint, for the way he gave her space to open up on her own terms. "Everyone makes mistakes," Shoto said gently. Her blue eyes widened in surprise as he pulled her into a warm embrace, pressing her head against his chest. For a moment, she marveled at how far he'd come, offering comfort in a way she never expected. "I don't know the details of your mistake, but I made one too. When I went after Midoriya and Ida without backup, it was reckless." "You could have been killed," Naruto murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She closed her eyes, inhaling his familiar, spicy scent. and let her shoulders relax. A content sigh escaped as his hand moved to stroke her hair. But to be fair, the situation was chaotic. My mistake was different. Shoto glanced down at her, his voice calm but probing. Do you want to talk about it? Naruto hesitated, memories of his worried expression when he saw the shuriken wounds on her back flashing through her mind. The physical scars had healed, but the emotional ones lingered. She smiled faintly, her resolve firm. After the exams, she promised, a bittersweet edge to her tone. I'll explain everything, why not bringing Sasuke back broke me, and why your words that day made me cry like a baby. Shoto chuckled softly, a rare smile playing on his lips. You were a cute crying baby, even if your tears ruined my shirt. Her eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected compliment, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered if he was simply learning how to comfort his crush. But no, Shoto was straightforward, and he probably did think she looked cute. The thought made her laugh. You're getting better at compliments, Naruto teased, her grin returning. Keep it up, and I might just reward you. A faint blush dusted his cheeks, but he didn't look away. Naruto's laughter echoed through the room, the tension lifting ever so slightly. I thought I would find you here. Naruto sighed, crossing her arms as Midoriya tore his gaze from the monitor. It had been a few minutes since Todoroki had left. He had finally decided to consult Yaoyorozu about his plans, leaving Naruto with no choice but to seek out Midoriya. Between her two teammates, he seemed like the easier problem to address. Uzumaki, why you were looking for me? Midoriya asked, blinking as he stepped back. His green eyes widened as the blonde-haired girl stepped forward. A quick glance at the monitor showed Asui and Tokoyami still grappling with their math teacher. Could they actually escape and manage to handcuff their instructor? That's right, Naruto replied. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crystal gem necklace Tsunade had gifted her, a reward for winning a personal wager. Her fingers traced the smooth edges as Midoriya watched her nervously. If only she could summon the same reckless courage she had as a child. Midoriya frowned. Why were you looking for me? Because we need to talk, Naruto said bluntly. I owe you an explanation. Ever since you and Bakugo found out the truth about me, you've both been acting off. And I've been avoiding the issue, too. We need to clear the air. She tucked the necklace back beneath her collar and met his gaze. Once I explain everything, I hope we can move on. Besides, I could use advice from one of the smartest people I know. Midoriya flushed slightly at the compliment, his cheeks tinged pink. It reminded Naruto of how unaccustomed he was to praise during their early school years. Things were better now, his classmates respected his quirk, and the bullying had stopped. Even Bakugo's harsh remarks had lessened. I wasn't acting weird, he muttered defensively. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You've been avoiding me ever since you found out. And I've been avoiding you, too. So let's agree we're both at fault for not communicating. Leaning against the wall, Naruto sighed. Deep down, she knew she should have told him and Bakugo sooner. But revealing her identity as a kunoichi, or worse, a jinchuriki, wasn't easy. Not even Hinata, her best friend, knew the full truth about the 9 tails sealed within her. Why didn't you tell me? Midoriya asked quietly, stepping closer. His green eyes were earnest, searching hers for an answer. Todoroki didn't say much, but I thought you trusted us. Have we ever given you a reason not to? I know it's your secret, but I just want to understand. Naruto inhaled deeply, trying to steady her nerves. Sharing this secret felt monumental, an important step toward opening up to others beyond Shoto and Nehire. If she wanted to heal, she couldn't keep running from her past. How do you tell someone you're a kunoichi? Naruto asked with a faint smile. Her blue eyes dropped to her hands, memories of battle scars flashing in her mind. In my world, it's simple, you wear a Hitai 8, and that says it all. But here, there was never a good time or reason to bring it up. Midoriya regarded her thoughtfully, as though weighing her words. She could only hope he understood. If she said she was done with her old life, it would be a lie. Until the Akatsuki were dealt with, or until the council stood by her, she couldn't truly leave it behind. And the Jinchuriki part? He asked gently. Naruto exhaled and tilted her head back to stare at the ceiling. I haven't even told my best friend, she admitted. Midoriya's eyes widened, and she offered a small, bitter smile. Being a Jinchuriki isn't easy. Hibiki wasn't exaggerating when he said we have difficult childhoods. Most of my struggles stem from that. People judged me for something I couldn't control. I was scared of how you'd react. Midoriya was quiet for a moment, his gaze softening. He slid down to sit against the wall beside her, looking at the monitor briefly before turning back to her. Kachan and I didn't make it any easier, did we? He said with a nervous smile. Naruto blinked in surprise as he continued. Instead of supporting you, we made things worse. I know what it feels like to be judged for something beyond your control. It feels like the whole world is against you. And it hurts. It really hurts. Naruto nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest. They make you play a role you never chose, she said, fingering the necklace around her neck. When you were quirkless, the world saw you as weak, even though you had the potential for strength. When you're a Jinchuriki, they treat you like the very monster they fear, ignoring your cries and screams. No one listens. They simply look away, refusing to see the human being behind the label. It was a relief to finally voice these thoughts to someone who could understand. Gaara was a good confidant, but she couldn't rely on him every day, he had his own burdens to carry. Shoto was empathetic too, yet she knew his understanding would always have its limits. Midoriya, on the other hand, was the closest to truly grasping her struggles. We're all human, aren't we? Izuku said thoughtfully. She nodded, rubbing the back of her neck as she considered his words. I know why you came here, but I have to ask, why did you choose to become a hero? You already have a career as a kunoichi. Why this path? The answer lingered on her tongue, because being a kunoichi means suppressing my emotions and turning a blind eye to the injustices in the world. But as she paused, she realized there were injustices here too. People were judged based on their income, quirks, age, religion, and race. Even heroes sometimes looked the other way. Yet, there was a fundamental difference. Being a kunoichi means I can only act within the limits of my mission or my government's orders, she explained. Her gaze shifted to her hands as she continued. But being a hero? It gives me a chance, however small, to make a real difference. To help kids like me and Gaara who felt the sting of rejection and isolation. When people felt abandoned by society, they often lashed out, making choices they'd later regret. Midoriya nodded, offering her a warm smile. That's an incredible goal. But I can't achieve that goal unless we work together, she replied firmly. To pass this exam, I need you to set aside whatever issues you have with me. Midoriya hesitated, glancing at the clock before running a hand through his hair. The gesture betrayed his nervousness. Was he about to refuse her? She began to doubt whether apologizing and opening up to him had been the right approach. I'm not the problem, he finally said. His expression turned grim as he glanced at the monitor and then back at her. Even if we work together, Kachan won't cooperate. I've tried talking to him, but he's made it clear he won't work with either of us. Naruto sighed but met his gaze steadily. Let me handle him. Just tell me where I can find him. If Midoriya, his best friend, couldn't reason with him, then Naruto would have to step in. She was prepared to be the whirlwind that broke through Bakugo's stubbornness. What are you doing here, Whiskers? Shouldn't you be busy clinging to icy hot? Naruto clenched her fists, fighting the blush that threatened to rise under Bakugo's sharp glare. He sat on the steps leading to the pathways that branched off to their training sites, his crimson eyes filled with irritation. She took several calming breaths, reminding herself not to throttle him. If it were anyone else, she'd accuse them of jealousy. But Bakugo jealous? That seemed absurd. Though Kaminari might joke that he liked her, Naruto had a nagging sense that there was something deeper, something unspoken, that made such feelings unlikely. "I want to talk to you," she said, leaning against the wall. Bakugo grunted and rose from his seat. "Then I'm leaving, Whiskers." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "We need to talk, Blasty. And we can't do that if you're acting like a child." She folded her arms, ignoring the loudspeakers announcing Shoto and Yaoyorozu's match against Aizawa-sensei in the distance. A part of her wanted to watch the match, to cheer for her friends, but ensuring she passed the exam took precedence. Midoriya had tried, and failed, to reason with Bakugo, hampered by lingering traces of fear from their past. But Naruto didn't have that fear. She was determined to succeed, and she wouldn't let Bakugo's stubbornness stand in her way. "I'm not acting like a child," Bakugo retorted sharply, flipping her off. "And I'm not wasting my time arguing with you." Naruto's eyebrow twitched as she fought the urge to react. "Don't punch him," she reminded herself, inhaling deeply to suppress the temper simmering just below the surface. If her fist even grazed Bakugo's face, the teachers would fail them without hesitation. This wasn't the exam site where they could justify their actions, this was the waiting area, where they were expected to keep their composure. "Are you afraid to talk to me? Worried you might catch cooties?" she taunted, her words halting Bakugo mid-step. His brows twitched, and his shoulders stiffened, a telltale sign she'd struck a nerve. Naruto smirked, the expression sly and almost fox-like, clearly satisfied with her ability to bait him. She knew his pride was his Achilles heel, the moment she bruised it, he couldn't resist engaging. Predictability wasn't always a bad thing, it gave her exactly the opportunity she needed. "What do you want, Whiskers?" Bakugo growled as he stomped toward her, his blonde hair catching the light. He stopped just a few meters away, arms crossed firmly against his chest, his red eyes glaring into her blue ones. For a brief moment, his gaze seemed to waver, but he quickly reinforced it, his scowl sharper than ever. "Treat him like Kakashi-sensei used to treat me." Naruto recalled how Kakashi-sensei had pushed her limits, forcing her to confront her weaknesses, especially when she resisted working as a team with Sasuke and Sakura. "Midoriya told me you're refusing to work with either of us," she said, slipping her hands into the pockets of her kimono-style outfit. Bakugo didn't deny the accusation, merely grunting in response. "Why? What's your deal? Do you think you're better than us?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "I don't need either of you to beat All Might," Bakugo declared, his eyes narrowing defiantly. Naruto blinked, momentarily stunned by his words. They hit her like a haunting echo from her past. "I don't need you to beat Itachi, Naruto. It's my fight." Bakugo's words reminded her of the brother she once had, the one who refused to acknowledge her desire to fight alongside him against the man who had destroyed their peace. She shoved the painful memory aside and refocused on Bakugo, her teeth gritting in frustration. Sacrificing her pride, she decided to level with him. "I've never thought of you as stupid, Blasty," she admitted, glancing briefly toward the staircase before meeting his gaze again. His chest puffed out slightly, clearly pleased by the unexpected compliment. "But you'd be the biggest idiot if you think you can face All Might without working with me or Midoriya. No one beats a stronger opponent alone." "I'd rather lose and look like an idiot than rely on either of you," Bakugo growled, his scowl deepening. "Then you'll fail the exam, plain and simple," Naruto snapped. "Whiskers." Naruto didn't know what compelled her to continue, but something in Bakugo reminded her of her younger self, the cocky dreamer who once aspired to become Hokage. Maybe they weren't so different after all. She clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "Did you know I almost lost my chance to become a kunoichi?" she began, her voice quieter but no less firm. Bakugo blinked, his expression shifting slightly. Naruto took a deep breath, steadying her trembling hands as memories of her 12-year-old self surfaced, memories of Kakashi's harsh scolding. "You can't do this alone, Blondie." "I used to think like you," she continued. "You? A month ago, you were practically a machine," Bakugo scoffed. "You really expect me to believe we're alike in any way? You've seen me at my worst, Naruto reminded him, her gaze shifting briefly to the ceiling as she tried to steady her racing heart. Back home, I was a cocky brat. I thought I could handle everything on my own, that I didn't need my teammates. I believed I was strong enough to take on any challenge by myself, and I trusted no one but myself to get the job done. My teammates? I thought they'd just screw it up. She paused, memories of Sasuke's cold dismissal and their endless clashes flickering in her mind. Bakugo remained silent, his intense red eyes fixed on her, as though searching for some hidden truth in her words. My arrogance, along with my teammates' stubbornness, nearly cost us everything. We were so blinded by pride that we never stopped to ask why we were put into teams of 3 in the first place, Naruto said, her voice growing more resolute. It wasn't until Kakashi-sensei confronted us with a test, one designed to force us to let go of our pride, that I finally understood the value of teamwork. Bakugo raised a single eyebrow, clearly intrigued despite himself. I cannot speak to my teammates' reasons for refusing to forsake their pride, Naruto said, shaking her head as she fixed her gaze on her classmate. Taking a deep breath, she continued, but I know my own reason. I didn't trust them to have my back. One of them was more focused on pursuing personal interests rather than staying focused, while the relationship between the other teammate and me is complicated. Bakugo snorted in response. And how does this make us alike? Naruto's expression softened as she looked at the ceiling. The dynamic I share with that teammate mirrors the relationship you have with Midoriya, she explained. Bakugo blinked, ready to protest, but she pressed on. In this scenario, I am the equivalent of Midoriya, and he is my Kachan. Like Midoriya, I yearned for his acknowledgement, not as someone inferior, but as his equal. Acknowledging Midoriya doesn't make you weak, Bakugo. If anything, it motivates you to improve, because that's what he and I did for each other. She paused for a moment, her voice quieter now. That's how it was, until Orochimaru shattered everything. If Itachi had never returned to disrupt Sasuke's resolve as he did. What's your point? Bakugo asked, clearing his throat impatiently. My point, Naruto replied firmly, is that even the strongest individuals sometimes need help. Acknowledging that you need our support to take on All Might doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. Now, unless you're some kind of coward, team up with Midoriya and me. Bakugo grunted in frustration, turning his back to her as he walked away. Did my words reach him? Naruto wondered, hoping they would be enough to convince him to consider working with them. She clasped her hands together briefly before letting them fall back to her sides. Suddenly, Bakugo stopped, clicked his heels together, and turned his head sharply to face her. Are you coming or not? He barked. I'm not wasting my time working with Deku unless you're there. He pisses me off. Naruto's lips curved into a grin as she jogged after him, resisting the urge to pump her fist in triumph. Whether Bakugo realized it or not, his words gave her a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pass the exams without any major setbacks. And once it was all over, perhaps she could finally explain why she hadn't been completely upfront with him from the start. A month ago. When it comes to seals, your mind must be filled with creativity and imagination. Naruto blinked and raised her eyebrows as Kenji casually tossed the whiteboard marker into the air. Today marked her first day of learning the art of sealing with him, a path that would connect her to a heritage she had been unaware of. However, as she gazed at the complex diagrams and notes on the board, a sense of uncertainty washed over her. The intricate patterns seemed more suited for an advanced space program than something a beginner like herself should be dealing with. Why is that? Naruto asked, furrowing her brows as she turned her gaze from Kenji to the board. Wasn't intelligence the key to understanding seals? She had always heard that sealing was one of the most challenging arts in the ninja world. After all, more shinobi specialized in genjutsu than in sealing techniques. Kenji paused for a moment, looking down at her with a thoughtful expression as he stroked his chin. His demeanor was unlike that of Kakashi-sensei, who often grew irritated by her questions. Instead of annoyance, Kenji seemed genuinely contemplative, as though carefully considering the best way to answer. I can teach you how to create a seal, But the real work is understanding how to make sealing techniques meaningful to you, Kenji explained, leaning casually against the whiteboard. His hazel eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as a small smile curled at the corners of his lips. The problem with many shinobi is that they lack creativity, and that's why they find seals so difficult. They fail to see that creating a new seal is like painting on a blank canvas. You can't create something from nothing unless you understand the process. Although his words made sense, Naruto was still somewhat confused. "What do you mean, Kenji-sensei?" she asked, crossing her legs as she leaned back slightly, her posture stopping just short of knocking over the large stack of books piled behind her. She had no idea why there was such a precarious tower of books behind her, but she knew it would be disastrous if it fell. Kenji sighed and uncapped his whiteboard marker, kneeling down to draw a series of characters arranged in a spiral pattern on the floor. Naruto's blue eyes watched intently as Kenji seamlessly transitioned into a series of hand seals. With a swift motion, he slammed his hand down onto the spiral of characters. The ground beneath them began to glow, and Naruto's eyes widened in amazement as the wooden floor began to rise and shift, forming a delicate wooden flower. "See that flower?" Kenji asked, gesturing to the creation. "I didn't need a sheet of paper to make it. And that marker? It's not necessary to create a seal either. What matters is the order of characters, adding the right shape to convey the meaning, and then you have your seal." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as she took in the wooden flower, which bore a striking resemblance to a sunflower. She couldn't help but wonder if it was a coincidence or if Kenji had somehow known that sunflowers were her favorite. Shaking her head slightly, she rubbed the back of her neck, still processing what she had just witnessed. "If it's truly that simple, why does the Academy make it seem so difficult to master?" the blonde inquired, her lips curling into a slight frown. The description of seal making sounded almost like a recipe, straightforward as long as one followed the instructions. It didn't seem like something to be overly complicated. "Because they overcomplicate it," Kenji replied. The head of the Uzumaki clan shook his head, leaning forward until only a few centimeters separated them. "Most shinobi think that seals are difficult to use in battle." Naruto frowned. "Aren't they?" Kenji shook his head, rising from his seat. His eyes briefly drifted to a photo on the wall. It depicted him standing outside a large building with several other redheads, presumably members of the Uzumaki clan. He turned back to her, his gaze thoughtful. "It's only difficult if you try to imitate others or force yourself into something that doesn't suit you," Kenji explained. He leaned back, looking at the photo once more. "Some clan members draw shapes and place characters inside them, while others use paper, though personally, I can't stand using paper. It's a waste of time. The key is, seals become easier when you find what works for you." Naruto studied him for several seconds before nodding. Perhaps this wouldn't be as difficult as she initially thought. It was like art, there were no strict rules to follow. If she lost a piece of paper, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Maybe if someone had explained it to her this way when she was younger, she might have taken more interest in it. "But how do I know what works for me?" she asked, tilting her head as she picked up a wooden sunflower. "Can I experiment freely, or do I need to do it in front of you?" Kenji studied her for a moment before kneeling to meet her eyes. His eyebrows twitched, and the glint in his gaze suggested he knew exactly why she asked. Though he couldn't possibly guess the reason behind her question, he'd probably had a student ask him something similar before. "Don't even think about trying a seal without my supervision, Naruto," Kenji stated firmly. Naruto's blue eyes widened as he flicked her forehead. It stung, but there was an unexpected tenderness in the gesture. A month ago, he'd practically threatened her, now, his manner was unexpectedly kind. Kenji blinked, clearing his throat. "I used to do the same thing to your mother whenever she had a reckless idea." The words hung in the air as both looked away. What should she say? Should she comment on how close he must have been to her mother, or ask him about her? But it was likely too soon for that. They had agreed to keep their relationship strictly professional until she felt more comfortable. "Why can't I try a seal on my own?" Naruto asked, crossing her arms. Was it because she was still new to it? As long as she didn't channel chakra into the seal, she should be fine, right? Sealing can be easily messed up, and it can be dangerous, Kenji explained. He rubbed the back of his neck and glanced at the framed photo of his family. One wrong stroke, one incorrect shape, and you could cause a massive explosion, or even send yourself to another time or dimension. Naruto's eyes widened, and she jumped in her seat. That sounded amazing. Could a seal really send someone back in time? Wouldn't that disrupt time and space? Still, the possibility was thrilling. Then again, he might just be teasing her. Has that ever happened, or are you messing with me? She asked eagerly. Kenji chuckled. Ask Akira Abasama about how my grandfather nearly prevented the first Hokage from being born. Naruto stared, her mind racing to process what he had just said. Did he just imply that her great-grandfather had nearly stopped the first Hokage from being born? Her head snapped back to Kenji, who was smiling with pride. You've got to be kidding me, she said, incredulous. Why do you think I became interested in seals? Kenji scoffed. Not because of their limitless potential. I was a rebellious kid who didn't care about those things, and Gramps knew it. So, he'd tell me and your mother that story to spark our interest in sealing. Naruto gawked. Sealing is like magic, isn't it? Kenji snorted, looking at her as if she had just insulted the art of sealing. The way he spoke about it made it seem far more profound than any form of magic. Seals were logical, tangible. Magic, by comparison, was chaotic and illogical. Magic has no logic, he replied, his voice firm. Seals, on the other hand, are grounded in logic. Now that I have your attention, we'll begin with the foundations of sealing. Looking back on this day, Naruto would admit that Kenji was an exceptional teacher. Though he had been harsh when they first met, making her feel like an outsider, he had a way of captivating her attention. Unlike most teachers who struggled to keep her engaged, Kenji made her not only pay attention but fall in love with sealing, a skill she now planned to showcase in her practical exam. So, you want to make a plan, Uzumaki? Naruto nodded, glancing at Bakugo and Midoriya. Midoriya, with his green hair, frowned as he nervously rubbed his knuckles, expressing his anxiety about the upcoming exam. Meanwhile, Bakugo, with his trademark scowl, leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable as he looked at her. Bakugo raised an eyebrow, clearly curious about what she was planning. Naruto rubbed the back of her neck before speaking. We need to figure out how we can capture All Might. Midoriya's eyes widened in disbelief, and he quickly jerked his head towards her. His expression pleaded for her to confirm that she was joking, but Naruto simply shook her head. She knew how unbelievable her words must have sounded to him. All Might was extraordinarily powerful, but she refused to simply give up. There was no way she would accept defeat just because he was the #1 hero. Are you serious? Midoriya asked, his voice trembling, his body shuddering with disbelief as he looked at her. Naruto shrugged, unfazed by his reaction. Midoriya began pacing, clearly agitated. We can't defeat All Might. It would be better to plan an escape strategy rather than face him directly. Bakugo turned to her, his eyes blazing with irritation. Do you even understand why I didn't want to work with Deku? He grumbled, glaring at Midoriya. I knew he'd suggest running away instead of standing up for ourselves. Midoriya flinched, and Naruto pinched the bridge of her nose, sensing the tension. Naruto didn't like the idea of retreating. Her stomach churned at the thought. She knew that Midoriya wanted her to agree with his plan, but running away had never been her style. We can't just run away, Kachan. Uzumaki. Midoriya insisted. His hands waved in the air as he glanced nervously around the corridor. We need to come up with a way to escape without engaging him. If we try to fight him, we'll be destroyed. Escaping without fighting? Naruto pressed her lips into a thin line, sitting down on the floor. That wasn't an option for her. All Might would find a way to confront them, whether they liked it or not. Not fighting him would make it seem like he was going easy on them, and she knew that wouldn't sit well with him, or with their teacher, Aizawa-sensei. If we go with that idea, we're all going to fail the exam, Naruto finally said, looking up at Midoriya and then glancing at Bakugo. Bakugo, though clearly pleased with her stance, said nothing, while Midoriya shook his head. You should know by now that Bakugo wouldn't accept running away, and I'm not one to shy away from a fight. Naruto looked down at her hands. Running away wasn't just about avoiding danger, it was about giving up. She wasn't about to run away from something she believed in. She'd faced greater challenges before, even when her life was on the line. If she could stand up to Orochimaru, she could handle this. This is All Might we're talking about, Midoriya exclaimed. His voice cracked with worry as he ran his hand through his hair, looking between her and Bakugo. Imagine fighting someone as strong as a top shinobi from your village. I've fought someone like that, Naruto interrupted, wrinkling her nose. She looked up at the ceiling, recalling the past. I got defeated, but I didn't run. And you know what? I was lucky Orochimaru didn't end my life right then. Midoriya groaned and hung his head in frustration, while Bakugo simply looked at her, unimpressed. Naruto smiled, remembering how Sakura and Sasuke had felt in those moments of danger. She'd fought beside them when they were most vulnerable, and she couldn't forget how they'd stuck together. But that was a long time ago. You really have no sense of self-preservation, do you? Midoriya cried out, clearly concerned for her well-being. Naruto's lips curled into a grin. It had been a while since anyone had told her that. She didn't have a plan when she confronted Orochimaru, and yet she survived. Nope, she replied, her grin widening. Midoriya slapped his forehead in exasperation, but Naruto laughed. His frantic movements as he steadied himself against the wall were amusing. If Midoriya didn't become a hero, he'd certainly be good at portraying someone in distress. Bakugo, on the other hand, stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. His red eyes gave away little, leaving her to wonder what exactly he thought of her approach. When I fought that shinobi, I had no time to plan, Naruto said, finally looking back at both of them. But now, I have time, and I've learned a few new tricks. I can bind people now. I can bind All Might and use handcuffs on him. Midoriya blinked, clearly taken aback by her statement. Bakugo, however, seemed intrigued. His eyes no longer showed irritation but a flicker of interest. Perhaps he didn't think she was completely out of her mind after all. And how exactly do you plan to bind him, Uzumaki? Bakugo asked, eyeing her carefully. All Might can break through anything. What makes you think you can hold him? Naruto smiled, clearly confident in her abilities. She could see the uncertainty in Midoriya's eyes, and it told her that he doubted her. But she was used to challenges. She would prove him wrong. I've been learning how to make seals from my mom's cousin, she explained, channeling chakra into her finger. With the right symbols and order, I can bind All Might and handcuff him. It's not impossible. Midoriya and Bakugo exchanged looks before turning their attention back to her. The gleam in Midoriya's eyes hinted at hope, while Bakugo's scowl remained, but there was an unreadable intensity in his gaze. I thought you were going to fight him, Bakugo grumbled, still skeptical. But it seems you're not planning on engaging him directly. Naruto gave a knowing hum and locked eyes with both of them. She couldn't afford to be the one to fight All Might, her role was to create the seal. If she could keep them from having to fight, that was the best outcome. Her smile grew as Midoriya finally seemed to understand. He believed in her plan, and now it was time to see if she could make it work. You need Bakugo and me to face him, don't you? Midoriya's face drained of color, while Bakugo turned to her, his gaze sharp. If you didn't want us to fight him, you wouldn't have come all this way to get us involved. Naruto grinned even wider, nodding enthusiastically as her eyes shifted toward the two boys. Midoriya trembled, his uncertainty evident as he hesitated, unsure whether he could handle it. Bakugo, however, wore a smirk, excitement gleaming in his eyes. It was a good sign, but there was one issue they had to face. Midoriya. Can you do it? Naruto's voice was steady as she locked eyes with the green-haired boy. Can you look past the fact that he's the #1 hero? Because when we enter that field, he'll be the villain. He'll be the one standing between us and having fun with everyone. We're getting stuck in summer school. If you can't do it, then I'll have to rely on Explosive Head. Midoriya sighed and ran his hand through his hair, his expression conflicted. The hesitation in his eyes reflected the inner struggle. Can I really fight my idol? Naruto could see it in his green eyes. Holding her breath, she clenched her fist, anxiously awaiting his response. Bakugo kept his intense gaze fixed on Midoriya. Finally, Midoriya took a deep breath and nodded. I'll do it, Naruto. Team Bakugo, Midoriya, and Uzumaki, please proceed to the starting gate. The sun blazed brightly overhead, almost mocking them with its warmth, as though signaling an easy victory for Naruto's team. But the stillness of the training ground made Naruto's shoulders tense, her sharp blue eyes scanning for any sign of where All Might be. How do we find him? Midoriya asked, his green eyes flicking toward her with a mix of expectation, as if she might have an ingenious plan to draw All Might out. However, Naruto couldn't sense anyone without chakra, and her hearing could only reach so far. Slumping her shoulders, she bit her bottom lip, trying once more to listen for anything. He'll come for us eventually, Bakugo reminded them, his red eyes narrowing as he scanned the empty streets. Unlike the others, he didn't mock Naruto for using her ears. It was a relief not to have him make a remark about her methods. We need to be careful when he reveals himself, Naruto whispered, her senses on high alert as a faint rustling sound caught her attention. Was it the wind? Or was it All Might preparing for an attack? Without chakra to guide her, she could only guess. She tightened her grip on her kunai, closing her eyes as her mind raced with questions. When would he strike? How would he attack? How much would he hold back? Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by a louder rustling, this time growing steadily stronger. Her eyes widened in realization. That's it. He can redirect the wind with his fists. She recalled the incident with the slug villain, when All Might used a powerful gust to attack. She cursed under her breath and quickly tackled her teammates to the ground, just as the wind howled to life. The force of the wind uprooted street lamps and sent debris flying, narrowly missing them. Glass shattered as it rained down around them, crashing onto the pavement. A few more inches, and any one of them could have been struck by the debris. Thanks, Uzumaki. Midoriya said, his voice filled with gratitude as Naruto placed her arms protectively around him, her blonde hair spilling to the side as she scanned their surroundings. There was only smoke behind them, but Naruto could hear the familiar, heavy footsteps of their examiner. Don't thank me yet, Midoriya. All Might is here. Midoriya's eyes widened, while Bakugo's red eyes sparkled with excitement, eager for the confrontation. Naruto wasn't sure how she felt. Excitement? Maybe. This would be the first time she could apply the techniques she had learned with Kenji. But there was also concern. She didn't know if their plan would work. The dust settled as All Might approached, his blue eyes gleaming with a chilling intensity that Naruto had never witnessed before. He had always been the smiling, kind-hearted hero, someone who seemed incapable of cruelty. But this person before her was something entirely different. All Might was a symbol of heroism, but the man in front of them was the antithesis of that ideal. Collateral damage? Does it even matter? All Might declared, narrowing his eyes and briefly scanning the crumbled concrete along the road before focusing on the trio. For a moment, there was silence. No one moved. The only signs of tension were the sweat and tremors visibly affecting Bakugo and Midoriya. Naruto clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Fear didn't grip her, not when facing Orochimaru, nor when nearly falling at the hands of a friend. But this situation felt like a stark reminder of the harsh realities lurking in the world. She looked at her teammates, their fear palpable, then glanced down at her own hands. With a deep breath, she snapped them both out of their stupor, slapping the back of their heads. What the hell was that for, Whiskers? Bakugo yelled, rubbing the back of his head as All Might closed the distance. Midoriya, still rubbing his own head, looked at her in confusion. Naruto just raised an eyebrow, gesturing toward their teacher. Realization dawned on both of them as they understood her intentions. "I can't carry out my plan if you're both just going to freeze up," she snapped, pushing herself upright. Now only 50 meters away, All Might was crouched, poised to spring forward. His piercing blue eyes fixed on them, filled with disdain, as if seeing them as little more than pests in his path. "If you don't take this seriously, you're going to regret it." In that moment, All Might was unrecognizable as a hero. His expression was harsh, the lines of his face cruel and menacing, evoking the sinister characters from the horror films Tokage often enjoyed. His eyes burned with a malicious intent, and it was clear he wouldn't hesitate to crush them if given the chance. He launched himself toward them, moving with blinding speed, his hand reaching out to strike. Naruto channeled her chakra into her limbs and leapt forward, grabbing his fist. She gritted her teeth, feeling the pressure of his strength, but her resolve held firm. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she managed to maintain her grip. All Might's eyes looked down at her, his expression tinged with reluctant pride. "The three of you should never forget," he warned, pushing his fist deeper into her hand. "In this exam, I am the villain." Her palm burned from the impact, but her eyes darted to the side. Neither Bakugo nor Midoriya had moved to attack. "Come at me with everything you've got." Naruto's gaze hardened. "You asked for this, All Might. Don't blame us for what happens next." Meanwhile, in the observation room, Uraraka marveled at the scene. "Deku-kun and Bakugo are lucky they have Uzumaki-chan with them," she commented, eyes wide with awe as Naruto held onto All Might's fist with impressive strength. Shoto and Yaoyorozu stood beside her, having just completed their own exams. "I didn't realize Uzumaki-chan could be that strong," Uraraka continued, unable to take her eyes off the screen. Shoto, however, couldn't help but feel a slight twitch at the corner of his lips. Hadn't they seen how formidable Naruto was before? She had faced the Nomu without breaking a sweat. Her reckless nature aside, this fight was something different. It wasn't just about physical strength, Naruto was using her mind as well. Yaoyorozu shook her head, her expression serious. Even with Uzumaki-san on their side, they are still in a difficult position. All Might is still the #1 hero. But All Might is fighting all three of them, Yaoyorozu, Shoto reminded her, his gaze shifting back to the screen, where Naruto's focused eyes were visible. He knew her well enough to understand that she always had a plan. And with Midoriya on their team, he was certain the boy had countless strategies written down in his notebook. Yaoyorozu frowned. Yes, but Midoriya-san and Bakugo-san would still be stuck if Uzumaki hadn't knocked some sense into them. She pressed her lips together, unimpressed. What good is teamwork if they can't shake their fear? Shoto knew better than to underestimate them. Teamwork was critical, and he'd seen firsthand how Naruto's unpredictability made her a valuable asset. Her chakra was a powerful advantage, and her ability to create seals was something even he didn't fully understand but knew was invaluable. "Don't doubt them," he said quietly. "Naruto's got a plan, and they'll make it work." "You have to be absolutely fearless to face All Might," Uraraka said, shaking her head in disbelief, her lips slightly pursed as she chewed on her bottom lip. Her gaze remained fixed on Naruto, who had just released his grip on All Might's fist. "I can't understand how Uzumaki-chan isn't terrified of him." Even at the USJ, she stayed completely calm when the villains attacked without warning. "Because he isn't the most daunting opponent she's faced," Shoto replied, scratching the back of his neck and leaning forward slightly. Unlike everyone else in their class, and possibly the entire year, Naruto had far more experience. Experience trumps everything. While the rest of them were busy with their studies, the blonde was out completing missions. What set Naruto apart wasn't just her experience, she also lacked fear of failure, or even All Might himself. For Naruto, fear takes a lot to trigger, Shoto continued, shaking his head. All Might just doesn't intimidate her enough. Both Yaoyorozu and Uraraka blinked, their eyebrows raised in surprise. They didn't press him for answers, but there were unspoken questions in the air. While abandonment was one of Naruto's deepest fears, There were others too, like the loss of control over the Kyuubi and being judged for what lay within her. Naruto's a girl with extraordinary courage, Recovery Girl commented, shaking her head. That kind of courage is exactly what Bakugo and Midoriya need. Without her, those two would have been in serious trouble. There were discussions about pairing her with Kaminari and Ashido, but Eraserhead stuck with his choice. Yaoyorozu frowned, while Shoto tilted his head in thought. He could see why some teachers might have considered other pairings. Naruto had a knack for strategy, and she was known for her cunning. Their very first battle had showcased that skill, but in hindsight, Shoto knew it wouldn't have worked. Kaminari would likely have been distracted by Naruto's presence, flirting with her rather than focusing on the task. Shoto couldn't help but scowl at the thought. He, too, often struggled to keep his composure around her. Going up against Principal Nezu would have been tough for her, considering his quirk is his intelligence, Yaoyorozu noted with a frown. She would have had difficulty countering that. She might have struggled, but Eraserhead knew Uzumaki could pull out a few tricks to handle him, Recovery Girl interjected, leaning back in her chair. If she'd been paired with Kaminari and Ashido, they would have relied on her intellect to get them out of trouble. That would have undermined the whole purpose of their pairing. Uraka leaned forward, her concern evident. But why did Aizawa-sensei pair Uzumaki with Midoriya and Bakugo, then? Sometimes, when you have two students who won't listen to each other, you need a bridge, a mediator, Recovery Girl answered, gesturing with her cane. She watched the three teens on the monitor closely. Out of everyone in the class, Uzumaki is one of the few who can talk some sense into Bakugo. She doesn't tolerate nonsense and knows how to manipulate situations to her advantage. Eraserhead wanted her to manage the friction between them. So basically, Aizawa-sensei was worried that without Naruto there, Bakugo would throw a tantrum and treat Midoriya like a child, right? Shoto asked, raising an eyebrow. Recovery Girl gave a subtle nod, her expression one of faint amusement. He had hit the nail on the head. Sounds like Uzumaki-chan was assigned to babysit them, Uraka commented, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Suddenly, the monitor in front of them erupted in a massive cloud of dust. Uraka squeaked and moved closer, trying to see what had caused the explosion. Yaoyorozu tilted her head, intrigued by what the trio might have planned. Shoto simply pressed his lips into a thin line, awaiting the reveal. As the dust cleared, Bakugo and Midoriya were seen standing side by side, each holding a gauntlet packed with explosive sweat. Naruto stood before them, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement as All Might staggered slightly from the surprise attack the trio had launched. With a swift motion, Naruto formed a series of hand signs, summoning an army of clones onto the battlefield. Shoto couldn't keep track of the number, but he estimated there were well over 60 clones. Each one wore the same smirk as the original Naruto before charging toward All Might, overwhelming him like a wave of sand engulfing a person on a beach. Bakugo and Midoriya exchanged a glance, then sprinted toward the clone-covered All Might, prepared for the next phase of their battle strategy. Why are they charging toward All Might? This is their opportunity to retreat. Uraka exclaimed, frustration evident on her face as she looked from him to Yaoyorozu. The two teenagers shared her confusion, equally puzzled by the situation. They're seriously overestimating themselves if they think they can defeat All Might. Shoto scowled, his gaze fixed on Naruto, who appeared calm despite the chaos. It seemed like madness, as Uraka suggested, but Naruto had earned the right to be confident. If it had been anyone else, he would have called them reckless, but not Naruto. She was the girl who had defied expectations at the sports festival, winning every round, something no one else had managed to do. Naruto was the only one who wasn't intimidated by his father and the only one who would call him out if he made a mistake. She was the one who had uncovered the kidnapper when the heroes were at a dead end. If anyone could accomplish the impossible, it was her. Wiping the sweat from her brow, Naruto's left hand reached for her kunai. The original plan had been for Midoriya and Bakugo to engage All Might, while she prepared a seal. But All Might had anticipated her moves, keeping constant pressure on her. At that moment, her clones were overwhelming him, and she saw an opening. Naruto sliced her palm with a swift motion, a deep cut running from her thumb to her pinky. She had 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, before her wound would heal. She glanced at Bakugo and Midoriya, who were both watching her intently, waiting for direction. 3 minutes, she said softly, her voice steady. I need you both to hold him off for 3 minutes while I complete the seal. This is our only chance to restrain him. Midoriya and Bakugo exchanged a brief look, their expressions wary but resolute. Despite the intense fight, Bakugo had shown no sign of aggression toward Midoriya, working together to bring All Might to the ground. Naruto hoped that cooperation would continue until the battle was over. Do you really think your clones can stop me? All Might taunted, tossing Naruto's clones aside with ease. They flew through the air, crashing into nearby buildings in a cloud of white smoke. For a fleeting moment, Naruto felt a sharp headache as fragmented images flashed through her mind, images that made little sense. Are you three taking this seriously? Bakugo and Midoriya exchanged glares, clearly offended by the man's words. They took a deep breath, readying themselves. Bakugo's hands crackled with energy, and Midoriya's hand glowed with a bright green hue. Naruto, meanwhile, crouched down and began drawing a circle, carefully inscribing the characters of a binding seal. We're taking this seriously, she declared, her blue eyes locking with All Might's. Her anticipation was palpable as she bit her lip. Midoriya surged forward, his arm coiling back before launching toward the older hero. All Might remained unfazed, effortlessly grabbing Midoriya's arm and slamming him to the ground. Without hesitation, Bakugo fired a barrage of explosions at All Might, his red eyes gleaming with intensity. All Might leapt to avoid the blasts, his movements fluid as the explosions shattered the pavement, sending debris flying. He landed gracefully, though his expression remained unimpressed. Naruto's thoughts raced. I need to speed this up. With that, her hands moved quickly, summoning more clones to the field. If she wanted to minimize the risk to her teammates, clones would be the most efficient strategy. They would not only provide more distractions but also confuse All Might, preventing him from discerning her true intentions. She doubted anyone could figure it out. Her clones paused for a few moments, their gaze fixed on her before dispersing to various positions. Each clone knelt, swiftly inscribing the designated characters assigned to them. With a nod of approval, she closed her eyes, then propelled herself toward All Might with determination. As she moved, she formed a series of hand seals, inhaled deeply, and unleashed a powerful blast of wind in All Might's direction. The man with blonde hair crossed his arms, frowning as he shifted his position slightly. The wind surged, carrying debris from shattered glass and broken concrete, sending them hurtling through the air. Bakugo and Midoriya struggled to steady themselves, realizing too late that they lacked chakra. They pushed themselves up as the wind subsided. Next time, warn us, Whiskers. Bakugo shouted, rolling to the side just as All Might slammed his fist into the ground. A few more inches, and the force could have crushed the boy's ribs. Naruto chuckled nervously, while Midoriya, determined, quickly tackled All Might from behind, halting him from advancing toward Naruto's clones. Naruto's focus sharpened, she couldn't allow him to get any closer to her clones. She took a deep breath, channeling chakra into her legs, and sprinted toward All Might. Wind chakra enveloped her fist as she launched a powerful strike directly at his face. All Might blinked in surprise as he was pushed several meters back, a series of cuts forming across his face. That's a new move, All Might remarked, inspecting the marks on his face. I didn't realize you could channel wind with your punches. I'm impressed, young Uzumaki. I'm impressed with all of you, but this won't be enough for you to pass the exam. We know, Midoriya responded, panting and wiping the sweat from his face. His green eyes shifted to the side, and a smile formed on his lips, making Naruto frown. She followed his gaze and saw her clone smiling brightly, gesturing to the ground. Naruto blinked, then turned her attention back to the circle of characters now surrounding All Might. It was time to complete the final seal. She glanced at Bakugo and Midoriya, no words were needed. They understood each other without speaking. Bakugo pulled the pin from a grenade, his hands heating up before he launched a concentrated explosion at All Might. The hero stood still, walking toward them without flinching. The blast might not have been significant to someone like All Might, but it was enough to allow Naruto to finish drawing the final character. With a deep breath, Naruto weaved several hand seals before slamming her hands onto the ground. Bakugo. Midoriya. Move. The two teens exchanged a brief look before moving swiftly to either side of the road. All Might, about to scold Naruto, stopped as the ground beneath him began to churn. Concrete lifted and twisted, forming chains that wrapped around him, binding him to the earth. "You shouldn't have underestimated us," Naruto said, grinning at the restrained hero as she tossed the handcuffs to Bakugo. The blonde boy grunted and caught them, making his way toward All Might. With a smirk, he cuffed the struggling man. "We had this planned from the start." "How is this possible?" All Might asked, his eyes widening as the chains held firm. Naruto's grin widened. "A great strategist never reveals all her secrets." Team Uzumaki, Bakugo, and Midoriya, pass. Dear Anime Dreams family. That's all for now. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting content. Stay tuned for more from Anime Dreams.